Welcome to Spiritual Steps, a podcast about learning to pray, listen, and grow by taking small steps in the spiritual journey. I'm your host, Stephen Hovatter, and this is episode 20, Prayer Snacks. In this episode, I want to encourage you to enjoy short, simple prayers in the middle of your life. Now, so here's the deal. I know I'm hiding behind a microphone. I know this is audio only, but let me just say that there's a little more to me, your host, physically than I wish there was. And I would love to be in a little bit better physical condition. And so, like all good super nerds, I decided that the best way for me to do that was to read a book. I know, right? Like, it's not exactly a high calorie burning activity. But I kind of told myself, if I'll just read, if I make myself like read literature about fitness, then I will, somehow that will help me move through this process. And okay, maybe it's working. It's not that bad of an idea. We'll see. I'll keep you posted. But here's the deal. I'm reading this book right now by a lady named Michelle Seeger, and the book's called No Sweat, and it's about the science of motivation and how that affects your life of fitness, okay? And there was this section that I just could not help but think about in terms of our spirituality too, okay? And by the way, having a good spirituality of our physical nature is, something that we've talked about here before, and we'll probably talk about again. But at any rate, This particular passage was talking about, how we need to, in some ways, to keep ourselves motivated, we have to kind of lower the bar of what counts and what we notice as being actual physical exercise, okay? And it talks about how it strategically, like if you think about what's happening in the food industry, like the food industry makes it very easy to buy and make and consume food. And they know that people want and they will choose the easiest route. And so these, food marketers take take away every barrier to the point of entry into their product, into the food as they can. They want to make it as easy as possible to, get you eating their product. And, we know that if a particular food is, nicely packaged, all this stuff, then we're gonna get it, okay? Especially if it's really available. And then Seeger writes, I think this is so insightful. She says, now contrast that with the physical activity world. In essence, we've been encouraging people to forego tasty physical activity, quote, snacks that they can consume anytime, and instead buy large, expensive, multi-course meals, and that they have to get specially dressed to partake of many of those meals. We've created standards and rules for moving that actually make it more complicated to move, an activity that is an essential part of eating, just like eating. Our goal as physical activity promoters has not been to make movement as easy as possible for everyone. Instead, we've been trying to make sure that people do it, quote, right, but doing it properly, that is, doing specific types of exercise for the proper amount of time in the proper place and in the proper clothing often means that it becomes easier for people not to do it at all. Now, true enough in the physical world, and I think she's dead on to something there, right? As long as you think of your physical exercise, physical activity as being something that means going to the gym, putting on certain kinds of clothes, making sure you have your water, prepared, this big ordeal, and you only do it in that place, and you have to kind of go through this ritual of the exercise. Well, it becomes more distant to the rest of your life, and you're less likely to kind of do into it. It's easy to say, well, I'm going to be a little late, so I'm just not going to do it, or whatever. Here's the deal. I think that insight is completely applicable to our lives of prayer as well. And as I reflected on this episode, on this whole podcast, I think it's possible that some listeners may get the impression that prayer is always about sitting down and having this long time where you have this contemplative moment before the Lord, and there's a space for that. But here's the deal: we don't need to think about prayer as being so complicated and such a precise sort of ritual that has to be done in a certain way at the right time in the right clothes and all this kind of stuff. If we make it like exercise in that sense, then it makes it really easy for us to bail on it. And instead, if we kind of take the food analogy a little bit, okay, what if we think of kind of a healthy snacking way of having a prayer life too, where there's a space in our lives where between what we might think of as our meals, where we perhaps put a little bit more preparation and time into them, we allow ourselves to enjoy short simple moments of prayer, even just a few seconds long, in the middle of our life, in the middle of our day, and allow those kinds of prayer snacks to be a part of what our life before the Lord is, and maybe even the bulk of it. Okay, maybe they even make a more substantial part of our prayer life up because they fit into that world. They fit into the life that we're learning to live and trying to live with the Spirit of God. And so maybe those kinds of prayers can be helpful. And actually, there's a pretty good tradition about that, right? Like one of the most famous writers in spirituality was a guy named Brother Lawrence, who wrote a book. He's a kind of medieval monk, and he wrote a book about how he was a baker in his monastery, and he just wrote about what it means to constantly turn his attention to God while he's turning the cakes in the oven and this sort of stuff, right? And like while he's pulling the bread out and washing the pans and this kind of thing. Like those become spiritual acts because he does them in the awareness of the presence of God. And being able to maybe not have some elaborate process of prayer, but something that's just a simple turning of our hearts and attention to God is a way that we can kind of bring prayer into the fullness of our life, the full part of our life, instead of leaving it just separated and distinguished and isolated from our being. Okay, so here's the thing. I want to offer 3 ways of prayer that I think can be very simply done in short bursts throughout your day. And I just want to encourage you to take a couple of days where you try to do that, okay? And where instead of like just marking off like this big time of prayer, or maybe completely instead of doing that, you try to have like 10 or 15 or 20 or 30 or 40 3-second prayers through your day, just calling your attention to the presence of God in your life. Okay, so here's the first kind. The first kind of prayer is exactly that, the prayer of attentiveness. Okay, and in that you just want to say, God, help me notice where you're at work here. God, let me see your mission, your nature, your being. Let me be aware of your Spirit here in the middle of my driving, or in the middle of my office, or in the middle of my play with my kids, or in as I lay down, whatever it is. Just calling your attention. That's a prayer of attentiveness. God, let me see you. Okay, let me know your presence. Let me be aware of your presence here in this moment. So that's the first one. The second one, though, is very common. Prayer of gratitude. And in a prayer of gratitude, we look at whatever it is that we're experiencing in this moment, and we give God thanks for that. We say, thank you for, this food. Thank you for this bit of exercise that I'm engaged in, or thank you for my body, or thank you for my friendships that I'm here, and whatever it is that you're experiencing in that moment. Thank you for this time that I have to, walk my dog. Thank you for this moment when I get to come to work, or when I get my paycheck, whatever it is, that those things that are part of your life that you experience as being blessings, you take that moment and give God thanks for it right then in that moment. And I think the habit of that kind of prayer of gratitude, and if you think about what these two things do together, right? Like you have prayers of attentiveness and then prayers of gratitude at different moments of the day. These things are going to start like working in your soul. They're going to be spiritually formative to you as you keep calling attention to what, keep asking God to show you, bring your attention to those things that He's at work doing or giving you or blessing you with, or where maybe you could join in His mission, and then you're giving God thanks for those things as you receive them. I mean, that's a powerful combination. Third kind of prayer that I think can be very helpful are simply just prayers for help, okay? And in those moments where you find yourself being challenged, tested, or maybe even when you're doing something that you don't perceive as being difficult, but you just want to you want to ask the Lord to be with you and present with you in it, asking God for help. Those things, 3 things, right? Like prayers of attentiveness, prayers of gratitude, and prayers for help. I mean, these are just simple ways that we speak to God through in the middle of our day, in the middle of our walking in the world, okay, in the middle of our relationships, in the middle of our receiving of food and our sharing of our blessings with other people, our practices of hospitality and our practices of work and diligence in the world and responsibility. I think that's a powerful way of experiencing a life of prayer with God. So here's what I want to say as simply as possible. Celebrate small steps in the life of prayer. Abandon the idea of prayer as something that doesn't count unless it's a formal, out-of-the-way experience, okay? Be content with taking prayer snacks along the way. That's all for this episode. Thank you for listening. If you have any comments or you want to just extend the conversation, then reach out to me on Twitter. My username is @StephenHovatter. And if this sort of thing is useful to you, then go ahead and subscribe in whatever podcast app you love. I use Overcast. A lot of people use the one that comes built into your iPhone or your Android device or whatever. We'll be back soon with a new episode. Until then, keep taking the next step that you see in front of you, no matter how small, and may God be with you on each step of your journey. Peace.